All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for yet another episode here of Knight Brothers Commentary, bringing you part 2 of the NFL. And this is some of, just to refresh everybody's memories, some of Matt's ideas around how to make improvements to the league, additions, subtractions, changes. And really, Matt, I will let you sort of summarize what we covered in the first part of this series, the NFDL information, and then kind of kick off with what we're going to be talking about tonight.
All right, so basically the NFDL is kind of like the developmental league for the NFL.
Yep.
That was essentially the proposal that we talked about in the first part of this 3-part series, and the shared rules that the NFL and NFDL will use will be the third part of this series. So
Yep.
just keep an eye out for that sometime in the near future. But essentially, the NFDL will serve as the league, as the NFL's developmental league, with each NFL team being paired with another NFL team to be the parent club or parent clubs for one NFDL team. That's essentially the bare bones.
Yeah. And if you guys have thoughts or questions on that, I would encourage you to go to listen to part 1 of this series, and certainly leave any comments that you guys have in the comments section below. But tonight we are going to be talking about part 2, revisiting some of just the NFL. Not NFDL. This is NFL focused.
Yeah.
And Matt, I'm going to let you kind of get into the notes here.
All right. So essentially, the NFL is going to go through somewhat of a radical change, in my opinion.
Matt loves to radically change sports.
It is true.
In all ways, league structure, game structure, contracts, you name it. Matt's pretty much looked at it all. So I have not, aside from the notes here, I've not seen or heard much of this yet. So I'm excited to see the radically proposed changes.
Well, the first change isn't really so radical, as the NFL actually has been talking about this for a while now.
Okay.
And that is the 18-game schedule. But the way I did it, it's actually more similar to the CFL's. Because the CFL also has an 18-game schedule.
I did not know that.
But they have 3 bye weeks as opposed to just 1.
Yep. So not only are you adding 2 weeks of play, you're adding additional weeks in terms of bye weeks.
Yes.
So the season goes from what is now 17 weeks to what I would assume would be
21 weeks.
21 weeks. Hey, who doesn't want more football, right?
That's true. Who doesn't want more football?
Yeah.
And honestly, when you think about it, I mean, do we really need 4 preseason games?
Well, I guess you're gonna tell us no.
Honestly, I really don't.
Yeah.
I mean, if the NFL is gonna charge full price for preseason games,
The interesting thing about this conversation is we got to see some of this play out this year, right? Yeah. Because of COVID. So without an off season or a preseason to speak of, I think the lack of off-season time, preseason time benefited teams who largely remained intact from the year before, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you a couple of examples. So the Colts lost week 1 to the Jaguars. Jaguars are the worst team in the league, and they made us look silly. And I think a little bit of that was we were integrating a lot of new pieces, right?
Yeah.
DeForest Buckner on the defense was our major acquisition, obviously a new quarterback, and Phillip Rivers. And if we had played that game later on in the season, I don't think we lose that game. I just think it was a byproduct of not having the reps.
And that's somewhat true. I'm not going to sit here and say that reps, like game time reps, aren't necessary, because they are.
Yeah.
But I just don't think it's really fair to the fans for the NFL to have 4 preseason games and then charge full price for all of them.
Oh, I agree with that, Matt. I think, and
two preseason games I think is enough. 3 if you're going to be the Super Bowl champion and the runner-up. And the reason why I say that is because those 2 teams will play a 3rd preseason game a week before the actual preseason starts in the Hall of Fame game.
Okay, nice.
So
that's a cool little setup.
Yeah, because I figured, you know what? I mean, if the Super Bowl is kind of packed, why not try to make the Hall of Fame game that way too?
Yeah.
Because honestly, I mean, the way I see it, I mean, why not try to recreate some of that magic? Why not try to, I don't know, at least start off the season
with some excitement,
with the teams that were in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Matt, I like that idea, and I think again, it's just so under this new proposition that you have here, are there 3 preseason games? Or
here's the thing: it's only 3 preseason games for the Super Bowl champion and the runner-up.
And then they're 2 games for everybody else.
Yes.
So you're essentially removing 2 preseason games and turning them into actual games.
Yes.
I like that a lot. And I know that people will say wear and tear and this and that, but I think 3 bye weeks makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Gives time for people to get healthy. And you're not eliminating the preseason entirely to where, take the Colts example or even Tampa Bay, right?
Yeah.
Tampa Bay got off to a little bit of a rocky start this year.
That's true.
They end up winning the Super Bowl. And I think some of that was
Go Tom Brady.
Yeah, the GOAT. As much as it pains me to admit it, there's no argument even plausible at this point. But yeah, I think you would have seen them get out of the gate stronger had they had the time in the offseason and some preseason games.
That's true.
And we saw them surge late in the year and probably put one,
especially after the bye week. That's when they really started.
You're 100% right. And they put on one of the most surprising and dominant performances that I've seen in a Super Bowl in a really long time.
Yeah.
It was the game was never really, you never felt like they were at risk.
I mean, it really didn't.
The defense was smothering, and Tom played like Tom does, and just did all the right things when he needed to. So, anyways, I don't want to get us too far off topic, but I like the idea of 2 preseason games and 3 bye weeks, 18-game season. I think the NFL would certainly like it. More games, more money, more tickets, more sales, more TV revenue, etc.
Yeah.
And you're not throwing caution to the wind in terms of overlooking player safety. You're adding 2 additional bye weeks, which is really big for, recovery, both physically and mentally, as we see that being a more commonplace in the league.
All right. So essentially, the season starts on the 4th Sunday of August, and it will end on the Monday after the 2nd Sunday of January. So that is
Say that again. And is that the first preseason game or first regular?
That's the first regular season game. That's when, just to repeat what I said, it starts on the 4th Sunday of August, and it will end on the Monday after the 2nd Sunday of January.
Okay. So mid-January is season over, and that is regular season.
Yeah, that is regular season.
Okay, perfect. That's a good, September, October, November, December, you're getting football.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome.
Yep. So essentially everyone will play 2 games against the other 3 teams in their division, like they do now.
Yep.
Then they play 1 game against each of the 4 teams from another division within their own conference.
Okay.
With the assigned division being rotated on a 3-year basis.
Okay.
And then one team, and then they'll play 1 game against 1 team from each of the remaining 2 divisions within its conference, based on the final division standings from the prior season.
Okay.
Then you play 1 game against each of the 4 teams from a division in the other conference, with the assigned division being on a 4-year rotation basis.
Yep.
And then teams play 1 game against 1 team from the division of the same name in the other conference, based on the final division standings from the prior season.
Yep.
And what's interesting about this game is that it can either be played at one of the team stadiums, a neutral site stadium, or an approved international stadium for the NFL International Series.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I just figured that would be kind of interesting.
I know they've played some stadiums or some games at Wembley, I believe.
Yeah, Wembley is one of them. I think New White Hart Lane is probably going to be the replacement, just because the NFL put like $10 million into building that stadium. So and I think it has retractable turf. So,
and I know they've talked about taking it to other countries too.
And they have.
Yeah.
I mean, they have talked about it. I'm not sure if they're really going to do it. I would love for them to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't think they will at the moment.
Okay. And I only ask, we've seen the NBA, for example. The Pacers went to India, right? We've seen, the China games. We've seen South America. I mean, it's, these sports are becoming more global. Fans live all around the globe. And I think the more that you can, expose the game to everyone around the world is a good thing. So anyways, I know you're on your last piece here as far as how the schedule is constructed.
Yeah. So the final game will be a game against their designated rival.
Okay.
So for the Dallas Cowboys, it will be the Redskins,
or
at least the former Redskins.
I was going to say it's the Washington football team.
And honestly, I don't know. I hate that they dropped it, but honestly, I mean, if they're gonna have a new moniker, I wish they would bring back the Federals from like the USFL. I wish they would bring that back.
Yeah. I listen. I'm with you, Matt. I don't think it was necessarily worth changing at all, but that's the culture we live in now, and it doesn't bother me. So
yeah. So, and the neutral site game and the games against the designated rivals also apply to the same rules that I just described for the previous game format.
Okay.
But this is where I think it really starts to get a little more radical.
I was going to say, so far, so good. I mean, really, if we want to hit the pause button and kind of recap, the schedule looks good. Yeah. I like the idea of end of August to mid-January. You're reducing preseason games, adding them as regular season games, but offering 2 additional bye weeks.
Yeah.
Creating some excitement with a Super Bowl prior year matchup for the Hall of Fame game. Which I think is a great idea and certainly, could drive some excitement to kick off the year. So up until this point, I'm on board, and I got to say, I think the NFL might be too. So let's see now part B here, just how radical things get.
Now, the thing that I think is probably going to drive fans a little crazy is I changed a lot of the divisions in the NFL.
Okay.
So
you're redrawing lines here.
I am redrawing lines.
Now, that's going to affect rivalries.
That is true. And that's why I did the designated rival thing.
Okay, so that provides a little more context. So you're maintaining the rivalries,
or at least trying to,
through that schedule update, and now redrawing the divisions. And I have to ask, methodology, what was the intent, and then the methodology for the restructure?
I mean, the intent was to try to create divisions that are more, shall we say, geographically closer. Like the teams are going to be more geographically closer to one another.
Yep.
So for the NFC East, I have the Panthers, the Giants, the Eagles, and now the Federals, as I call them.
Washington football team.
Yep. For the North, I have the Bears, Lions, Packers, and Vikings. That doesn't change.
Yeah, they're as tight knit as you can get.
Yep. The NFC South, I now have the Cowboys, the Falcons, the Saints, and the Buccaneers.
Okay.
And for the West, I have the Cardinals, the Rams, the 49ers, and the Seahawks. That doesn't really change.
Yep.
The AFC East has the Ravens, the Bills, the Patriots, and the Jets.
Okay. Nice.
And then with the North, having the Bengals, the Browns, the Steelers, and now the Colts.
That's a fun division.
I mean, that is going to be a fun division.
I like that. That's
I mean, to me, it literally made no sense why the Colts are in the AFC South when we are literally, probably no more than a few hundred miles away from the Canadian border.
Correct.
It makes no sense.
Agreed.
Yeah. And for the South, I have the Texans, the Jaguars, the Dolphins, and the Titans.
Okay. So that one, you really just took out Indy there and kept the rest of that mostly intact. Now, I see on the sheet here, you have London/Jacksonville Jaguars.
And here's the thing. I don't know about the rest of you or the rest of you who are listening to this, but I have heard, there have been a lot of rumors that the Jaguars might actually go to London sometime in the near future.
I've heard that too. And they've talked about doing a split schedule.
Yes. And I actually took that to heart, which is why I have the London/Jacksonville thing.
Yeah. No, I like that.
So essentially they'll play the first 3 season, the first 3 regular season games plus the 2 preseason games in Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. And then they'll go to London for 5 weeks. Okay. And then they'll come back to Jacksonville for 5 weeks and it'll just keep going like that.
So I have to ask you this then. Do they ever play in a truly away game?
Yes.
Okay.
When they're in the States, they will play in
other stadiums.
Yes.
So it's not just staying in Jacksonville. Makes sense.
Yes.
I like it. I think that's the direction the league wants to go. It's a team that makes sense to me to do it because Jacksonville's kind of a small market anyways. To really hold an NFL franchise.
Yeah.
Now,
so the final division, the AFC West, will be the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Chargers. So nothing really changes on that front.
Yep.
So again, I can understand that a lot of people may hate that, but the way I see it, I think it was actually better just to kind of try to keep the divisions geographically closer.
Yeah. And Matt, as I look down the divisions here, I go down the NFC. In the NFC East, you've got Panthers, Eagles, Giants, Federals, or the Washington football team. So 3 of those teams are already in the same division.
Yeah.
Right? You go into the next one, the NFC North, it's unchanged. Bears, Lions, Packers, Vikings. The South, you've got Falcons, Saints, Bucks, already all in the same division. You add the Cowboys. And then the West is essentially unchanged. Cardinals, Rams, Niners, Seahawks. So it's, Matt, I really don't think it's that radical, to be honest. You're changing some things around in the AFC, but again, Bills, Patriots, Jets, you're just adding the Ravens, right? Bengals, Browns, Steelers, you're just adding the Colts. Texans, Titans, Jags, you're just adding the Dolphins. And then Broncos, Chiefs, Raiders, Chargers, unchanged. So it's a couple of small tweaks, and we're there.
Yeah.
Right? So just for the listeners, that's kind of a recap. It's not that radical. And I totally understand, it is kind of silly for the Colts to be playing teams that are, all over the place. Now I get it. Flights aren't that hard and, whatever, but this is actually done very well done.
Yeah. So probably the last thing I'm going to talk about is essentially the schedule format. So,
Okay.
Or at least the second half of the schedule format. So
Yeah.
pretty much all NFL games are probably going to be played on Sundays with a Monday night game and also some Saturday night games once the college football season ends.
Okay.
But here's the big kicker. There will be no Thursday game.
At all.
At all. Not even on Thanksgiving. Because if you remember from the NFDL episode,
Yeah.
assuming that you've actually listened to it, I actually made Thursday the day for all the NFDL games.
Okay. That's kind of cool, giving them the spotlight on Thursdays.
Yes.
I find that very interesting. Now, the most radical thing you've said is no NFL on Thanksgiving Day.
That is true.
Because that's a tradition. I mean, Cowboys, Redskins, you're going to have a hard time convincing people not to do that. But I do love the idea, Matt, of not getting rid of NFL on Thursdays, but providing a spotlight to prop up the NFDL.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm removing the NFL from Thanksgiving is because that's going to be the day of the NFDL championship.
I do remember discussing that now. And I get that. I think, Matt, and this is just me being Mr. Compromise, I think you could have 2 or 3 NFL games kicking off at noon and put your championship at the 8 o'clock slot for the NFDL.
I mean, that could work.
I'm just thinking again, you got to get these things accepted by the masses. I think that would be more plausible.
I mean, I suppose that's fair.
Yeah. But this is your deal, not mine. So I get it.
I mean, so really, other than that, one shared rule that both the NFL and NFDL will share,
Okay.
just for the sake of saving time on the third episode. But
Yeah.
But now, both teams must wear their dark color uniforms during games.
Okay.
So if you ever watched like a rugby game, like especially, shall we say, like the national team games, like if you like watching, say, Italy and France go off,
Yeah.
you notice that they're not actually wearing like they're not necessarily wearing, like one team is wearing a dark color and one's wearing a light color. They're usually wearing like the same dark. They're usually wearing dark colors.
Yeah.
Or at least that's something that I've noticed when I've watched a lot of rugby games.
Yeah. Matt, I don't watch the rugby nearly as closely as you do. If I see it on occasionally, I'll watch, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't understand the game as well as you do.
Yeah. But essentially, I just wanted to transplant that from rugby to American football, just because I actually kind of like the idea of it.
Yeah. I'm on
But here's
board.
the thing. I mean, so it's kind of like, it's somewhat similar to the color rush.
Okay. Yeah.
But you're not necessarily wearing like different uniforms. It's basically the same uniforms that you're traditionally wearing.
Yep.
So I'll put a picture up here on the screen for you, just to kind of.
Yeah. Matt's got a nice little graphic here that kind of shows an example.
Yeah. So just of like the Bengals and the Colts.
Yep.
So
who would now be division rivals, which makes sense. 2 hours down the road.
Oh, I know. I mean, that'd be a really fun game to watch.
There's no doubt. No doubt about it. And what I love about the idea of creating these divisions by geography is it makes the away games more feasible for away fans to attend, right?
Yeah. And that was also one of the ideas behind it.
Yeah. And I think that's a critical component here is I'm willing to drive 2 hours to go to Cincinnati, but I can't go to Houston.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of the idea behind some of this that I like. And it's not a perfect map, right?
Yeah, it's not a perfect map at all.
but certainly, there's an opportunity there, I think, for some of these tighter knit geographies. So anyways, I think it's all great, man. I love it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are going to be exceptions to this new color rush rule. And so, for example, let's say you have like the Bears and the Colts playing.
Yeah.
Since those are two teams that really kind of share similar colors, it doesn't really make sense for them to be wearing both blue at the same time.
That makes sense.
Or let's say if someone is colorblind.
Yeah.
And especially for teams like, let's say you have like the Jets playing the Federals or the Jets playing the Chiefs, that's not necessarily going to work because green and red are typically like the most troublesome people. Those are typically the most troublesome colors for people who are colorblind.
Oh, to differentiate.
Yes.
Okay.
So it also doesn't make sense to do things like.
So you may have some exceptions.
Yeah, so I'll have some exceptions just to try to, I don't know, I guess make things easier for both fans and players who are colorblind.
Yeah. More accommodating.
Yeah.
And I think that that's fine. I mean, I think that as a general rule of thumb, you're going to have your jersey and you're going to wear the color, uniform.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
But other than that, I mean,
we've got a part 3 on this.
Yeah.
Matt and I will touch base on that. For now, though, we're going to wrap up on this second part of the NFL series.
Yep.
Please, if you guys have questions, thoughts, or feedback, leave it in the comments section below. And we look forward to part 3 here in the next couple months.
I mean, just depending on our schedules and whatnot, it's either going to be during the draft or during the preseason. That's basically that's kind of what we have planned at the moment. So.
Perfect.
All right. Night Bros Commentary signing out.